King Christian IX was not only known as King of Denmark. Throughout his life, he also earned himself the nickname Father-in-law of Europe. You see, out of his 6 children he had with his wife Louise of Hesse-Kassel, 4 of them sat on European thrones, either as monarchs or as consorts. Through his 6 children, Christian was the grandfather of 39 grandchildren. Up until this day, his descendants still sit on most European thrones. Those monarchs include Margrethe II of Denmark, Charles III of the United Kingdom, King Philippe of Belgium, King Harald V of Norway, King Felipe IV of Spain, and Grand Duke Henri of Luxemburg. Former King Constantine II and former King Michael I of Romania were also descendants of Christian. Today's video will be the second out of 3 parts in which we look at the fascinating lives of his 39 grandchildren. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, you will get to know the children of his son George and his daughter Dagmar. When Christian's son George married Grand Duchess Olga Konstantinova of Russia, he already sat on the throne of Greece. Together with Olga, George had 8 children. Their eldest child was Constantine, who was born in 1868. Constantine's professors were handpicked to make sure that the heir to the throne received the best education possible. In 1882, he began his military education. During the Greco-Turkish War of 1897, which ended in a catastrophic defeat, Constantine served as commander-in-chief. In 1912, Constantine was named chief of the Hellenic Army. On March 18, 1913, Constantine suddenly succeeded to the Greek throne when his father was assassinated. Shortly after, the Second Balkan War broke out, which gladly for Constantine ended with territorial gains for Greece. When the First World War broke out, Constantine had a disagreement with the Greek Prime Minister over whether Greece should enter the war or not. This lastly led to Constantine having to abdicate in favor of his son. After a few favorable events for Constantine, he was offered the Greek throne back in 1920. After Greece's defeat during the Greco-Turkish War from 1919 to 1922, Constantine had to abdicate the throne for the second time. Back in 1889, Constantine had married Kaiser Wilhelm II's sister Sophia, with whom he had 6 children. After Constantine's second abdication, he went into exile, where he died only 4 months later in 1923. Constantine's younger brother was Prince George of Greece and Denmark. Despite being born in 1869 on the island of Corfu, George spent much of his childhood with his uncle Valdemar in Denmark. There he received a naval education. It is believed that George, who was openly homosexual, had a lifelong relationship with his own uncle. In 1891, George went on a tour through Asia with his cousin Tsarevich Nicholas. There he saved him from an assassination attempt. In 1907, George married Princess Marie Bonaparte. Even during their marriage, George stayed close to his uncle, whom he would visit several times per year. And for Marie, she also had several affairs with other men. Despite their affairs, Marie and George had 2 children. George died 4 days after his 50th wedding anniversary on November 25, 1957. His younger sister was Alexandra, who was married to Grand Duke Paul Alexandrovich. A year after their wedding, their first child was born. While 7 months pregnant with her second child, Alexandra jumped into a boat which was permanently moored on the bank of the Moscow River. She fell as she got in, but she continued her walk. The next day, she collapsed due to violent labor pains and gave birth to her son. She died 6 days later at the age of only 21. Prince Nicholas of Greece and Denmark was born in 1872 as the 3rd son of the family. In 1896, Nicholas, together with his brothers Constantine and George, helped organize the Summer Olympics. In 1902, he married Grand Duchess Elena Vladimirovna of Russia in Tsarskoye Selo. The couple had 3 daughters within the next 4 years. Prince Nicholas died in 1938 and was buried in the royal tomb at the Palace of Tatoy. Next we have Princess Maria of Greece and Denmark. She was born in 1876 and enjoyed a happy childhood. Maria loved Greece and used to cry when her parents explained to her that she had no Greek blood. This love for Greece would last a lifelong. In 1896 she became engaged to her mother's cousin, Grand Duke George Mikhailovich, after rejecting his proposal the year earlier. However, Maria broke off the engagement a few months later. For the next 5 years, George proposed to Maria twice a year until she finally agreed in 1900. The wedding was quickly held on May 12, 1900, before Maria could change her mind. Maria never became warm in her new home country of Russia and made frequent visits to Greece. The couple had 2 daughters. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Maria and her 2 daughters were in the United Kingdom, and Maria decided to remain in the UK in order to not go back to Russia. When news reached her that in 1918 her husband was arrested by the Bolsheviks, she tried to obtain his and his cousin's freedom in exchange for £50,000. Her attempt failed and the prisoners were killed in 1919. Maria and her daughters returned to Greece in 1920, where she married an admiral in 1922. After the second abdication of her brother, Maria lived in exile until she returned to Greece in 1940. She died there in December of that year. Next we have Olga, who was born in 1880 and sadly died at only 7 months old. Her younger brother was Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, who was born on February 2, 1882. At an early age, Andrew began his military career and was commissioned in the Greek army. He served as a lieutenant colonel in the Balkan Wars of 1912. Back in 1903, he married Princess Alice of Battenberg, with whom he had 5 children. Their only son, Prince Philipe, was the husband of Queen Elizabeth II. With his brother's abdication, Andrew and his family were also forced into exile. When his brother again ascended the throne in 1920, Andrew and his family returned to Greece. Andrew served during the Greco-Turkish War of 1919 to 1922. During his service, he disobeyed an order from his general. After the Greek defeat, Andrew was arrested for disobeying the order from his general. He was banished for life from Greece. He lived in the south of France away from his family for the next few years and died in 1944. The youngest child of the family was Prince Christopher of Greece and Denmark. He joined the Hellenic Navy at a young age. He was offered 3 thrones but declined them all. In 1920, he married a wealthy American widow by the name of Nannie Mae Stewart Worthington Leeds. Sadly, she died of cancer only 3 years into the marriage. Christopher remarried Princess Françoise of Orleans in 1929. Their only child, Prince Michael, was born in 1939. Christopher died only a few months later in 1940. We are now continuing with the children of Princess Dagmar of Denmark, who after her marriage to the later Tsar Alexander III was known as Maria Fyodorovna. Their eldest son Nicholas was born on May 18, 1868. Nicholas suddenly came to the throne when his father died unexpectedly in 1894. A 26-year-old, totally unprepared Nicholas was now Tsar. His reign saw the humiliating defeat during the Russo-Japanese War, the disaster that became known as Bloody Sunday, and the Revolution of 1905. Nicholas married Princess Alex of Hesse back in 1894. Her struggle to bear a male heir further made the imperial couple unpopular. When in 1904 their only son Alexei was born with hemophilia, his wife sought the help of the deeply unpopular mystic healer Rasputin. This only worsened the imperial couple's reputation. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 and Nicholas's catastrophic lead was the last straw. After yet another revolution in 1917, Nicholas had to abdicate the throne. He and his entire family were arrested and put under house arrest. In July 1918, the whole family was executed by the Bolsheviks. Nicholas's younger brother was Grand Duke Alexander Alexandrovich of Russia. He was born in June 1869 and sadly died at the age of only 10 months of meningitis. His younger brother was Grand Duke George Alexandrovich of Russia, who was born on May 9, 1871. He and his siblings grew up in the most simple way possible. George was considered to be the most intelligent out of all of his siblings. It was intended for George to have a naval career, but when he fell ill with tuberculosis in 1890, these plans were crushed. When his brother ascended the throne, George became the next Tsarevich, as Nicholas did not have any children. But due to his ill health, he had to relocate to Likani. George suddenly died on July 10, 1899, at the age of 28, while he was driving his motorcycle. He was later found by a woman who cared for him while he was dying. Grand Duchess Xenia Alexandrovna of Russia was the eldest daughter of the family. She was born in 1875 at the Anichkov Palace. She was educated by private tutors which focused their education on foreign languages. When Xenia was 15, she already wanted to marry Grand Duke Alexander, but her parents thought that she was too young. After 4 years, the couple finally was allowed to marry on August 6, 1894. Xenia devoted much of her time towards charitable works. During the First World War, she opened a large hospital in which she cared for the wounded soldiers. After her brother's abdication, Xenia fled to Aitodor and later to England. In 1933, her husband, with whom she had 7 children, died. Xenia spent the rest of her life in England, where she died on April 20, 1960. Xenia's younger brother was Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich, who was born in 1878. After the death of his elder brother in 1899, Michael became the heir presumptive to his brother Nicholas II until his nephew Alexei was born. Michael caused a scandal by dating a married woman by the name of Natalia. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son named George. In 1912, Michael married Natalia and thus shocked the imperial court. During the First World War, Michael assumed command of a cavalry regiment. When Nicholas was forced to abdicate in 1917, Michael was named his successor, but he declined the throne. On August 21, 1917, Michael and his wife were arrested by the Bolsheviks and put under house arrest. The house arrest was lifted 2 times until in March 1918, Michael was arrested for good. He was killed by the Bolsheviks on June 13, 1918. The youngest child of Maria and Alexander was Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna. Growing up, Olga's relationship with her mother was strained while she was very close to her father. Sadly, he died when Olga was only 12 years old. Much to her surprise, her distant cousin Duke Peter Alexandrovich of Oldenburg proposed to her in 1901. The wedding followed a few months later. Their marriage proved to be disastrous and remained unconsummated. After horrible 15 years for Olga, her brother Nicholas II annulled the marriage. A month later, Olga married Nikolai Kolikovsky, an officer whom she met and fell in love with a few years earlier. During the First World War, Olga served as an army nurse until her family had to flee to the Crimea. In 1920, Olga, her husband, and their 2 sons they had by then had to flee to Denmark. There, the family had a farm and lived a quiet life. Feeling threatened by Joseph Stalin, Olga and her family moved to Canada, where they also had a farm. After her husband's death in 1958, Olga moved into a small apartment in East Toronto. There she passed away on November 24, 1960. She was the last surviving child of Alexander III and Dagmar of Denmark. In next week's video, we will meet the children of Princess Thura and Prince Valdemar.